We've got another real-life business problem for Rocketblock's experts to solve in today's mock interview. Today's case features a classic company with a classic problem. Help Coca-Cola launch a new product. Watch as Maddie breaks down this unwieldy problem using an approachable structure and then perform some data and chart analyses as well as some quick math work to come up with a clear recommendation. As a reminder, if you want to build your structuring and math skills for real, you have to be practicing actively and deliberately. At the very least, pause this video each time a question is asked to try your own answer out loud, and when you're ready to get serious about prep, come to Rocketblocks to build your skills for real with our theory and drills. Good luck and have fun casing.
Coca-Cola has long been a global leader in beverage innovation, known for launching a lot of iconic brands, which you probably know about, but also a lot of experimental products. Recent efforts at innovating, though, in terms of their core product, such as limited time spicy Coke, had delivered mixed results. Some offerings quickly pulled from the shelves due to underperformance. I think spicy Coke lasted maybe 6 months. So the company's strategy team has actually engaged your firm to recommend where Coca-Cola should focus its next product launch.
Okay, interesting. I don't drink a lot of soda myself, but I see Coke products everywhere, so I'm excited to dig in a little bit more here. Sounds like this is in response directly to this spicy Coke failure, and the goal here is just we're looking for where Coke should be focusing, so we don't have a repeat of spicy Coke. Is that fair to say?
Completely fair.
Okay. Do they have a specific goal with this product launch? I'm assuming that there's a number, a metric, something they're looking for, given just how quickly they pulled spicy Coke.
Yeah, it's a great question. So Coca-Cola has an internal threshold of about 200 million in new sales in year one from any new product launch. So that's kind of like their line in the sand. Additionally, they want the new products to diversify toward a younger, up-and-coming consumer base, trying to appeal to, younger than millennials now, I'd say.
Okay. Yeah. Us millennials, we are getting old. Sad to say. And that $200 million, it's a really important hurdle for us to think about. Is this going to be focused on Big Coke? So I'm trying to understand, is this going to be a soft drink? Is this something that Big Coke, or is this something that one of Coke's subsidiaries, some of the companies that they own could be putting out?
Yep. So great question. I'd say, focus exclusively on non-alcoholic beverages, and I'd say focus under the Coca-Cola brand portfolio. So, their carbonated drinks are, they have soft drinks, water, tea, coffee, juice, even sports drinks now, I think. So, energy beverages. So think on brands like Coke, but also it could be Dasani, Smart Water, Gold Peak, Minute Maid. So think across their spectrum of products, but don't dive into some of the alcohol pieces that they might have going on with other companies like Jack Daniels.
Okay, great. Didn't realize they own Jack Daniels, but that's good to know. All right,
Partnership,
Ben,
don't own.
Okay, I think I've got what I need here. I'm gonna just go ahead and put together a framework for a minute, and then we can talk through it.
Excellent.
Okay, you ready, Ben?
Let's do it.
Okay, so there's three things that I want to look through. The first is going to be analyzing market opportunities. This is going to be what market do we want to play in? We know that we have to go over this $200 million in year one. So we need to identify large markets to potentially play in. The second is going to be, once we've identified that, what are the consumer preferences? This is going to be kind of looking now to tie to that second goal, that goal of so targeting the younger up and coming generation. So large market, then that up and coming. The next is going to be like the last one's our financial and our business case. We want to make sure that not only are we going to have the sales, but is this going to make sense from an R&D perspective, a marketing perspective, all of those things. So those are the three big buckets. So going to the first one is doing this market opportunity assessment. As I said, we need to hit $200 million or more in year one sales. So we need to be looking at large markets. So looking at large segments, I want to look at where we have a strong presence and where we have a weaker presence. Where we have a weaker presence, I think we could, that's some white space for us. We can improve without cannibalizing our existing sales. I also want to look at the fragmentation. Are these markets really concentrated? Are they pretty fragmented? Um, where are we underpenetrated? I also want to look at the growth rate. So is it a, $1 billion market today, but it's growing at 30%? Great. It's going to be a large market here in the next few years. So that's that first. We need to understand which categories we should be playing in. Then the next is the consumer preferences analysis. I want to figure out what matters in each category. What matters in water versus what matters in soft drinks versus what matters in juice are going to be very different things. So we need to understand what those customers value. And then how does that vary by age range? If we have two segments within a category, one with an older generation, one with a younger generation, I know that we're going to want to align with what that younger generation cares about. Um, I know that the younger generation drinks a lot less alcohol, and so I'm going to assume that they're drinking a lot less soda. They tend to be healthier, and so maybe we're looking at different categories there. Then I want to see how we perform and how we're perceived. I think it's important because Coca-Cola does have so many brands. Which of our brands are well received by these consumers? Does it make sense to brand something as Big Coke, or does it make sense to brand something as one of our subsidiaries? I know that for a long time people didn't realize who owned Chipotle, and so you're able to sort of hide that from the customers, if you will. And then finally, from the financials, we want to look at what are the margins here. What's the R&D required to come up with a new drink? I also want to think about sourcing. We've got to really we don't have a lot of clarity in terms of tariffs these days and interest rates. So there's a lot of financial things that we're going to want to look at. Also want to think about, are there any economies of scale or channel synergies that we can achieve here? So the first place I'd like to start is with this market opportunity. Do we
Excellent.
have any information about the markets that we're looking at?
Here's some feedback from Ben. Maddie's framework is straightforward and applicable to the case. You can imagine a story he'd tell to leadership at Coca-Cola about starting with large markets, looking at customer preferences in those markets, and then ending with the business case for what a new launch could look like. Maddie does well to reference some of his existing knowledge. For example, an insight that younger generations are more health conscious and that Coca-Cola operates with multiple complex brands is a chance for Maddie to demonstrate some insight and acumen during his structure. Maddie's third category, the financial case, fits well with this framework. That said, there was an opportunity here to be more clear about what kind of financial case we'd be looking to build. Maddie talks about margins and costs, but a clearer explanation of what he'd be looking for in his analysis could improve this bucket. Maddie does well to propose a next step and drive the case forward. It's clear he's in a position to lead the analysis and help launch this new product for real.
Yeah. Love kind of like the way you're thinking about this and, certainly have some data on that initial approach. So I'm going to go ahead and put something up on screen. So as part of your team's market research, an analyst has initially pulled this analysis together. Would love your insights from, the team on, what to utilize and what you see from this.
Yeah, this is really helpful. Let me just align quickly on what we're seeing. So here we have market share by product category for this current year. And the width of each column is the size of the market. And is that number at the top is in billions, I'm confirming. So $525 billion is the water market.
Correct.
Great. So this is showing us the size of the market and the width. The color bars are showing us who the main players are. Coca-Cola, we're in red. And then at the bottom, we have our expected 5-year CAGR. So this is a lot of information. So first looking at this, I'm seeing that, there's the water category. It's the lowest growing of the second slowest growing of the three at, 3.75-ish%. And we currently have 20% of the market. It's not the most dominated market. That seems to be there's 4 players that make up 70%, and then this other is 30%. Two things I'm noticing here: I'm not seeing a lot of white space, and I'm not seeing a lot of growth. It's a really big market, so we could find a product that could get $200 million in sales, But given the growth, the number of Stanley water bottles and refillable water bottles the kids are carrying around these days, I'm not seeing as that being the first one I'm going to jump towards. Okay, next one I'm going to is juices, growing at about 5%. We've got about 18, so we have the second largest share. That other is scary because that's telling me it's super fragmented, um, and there's probably a lot of players there. Given the kind of the lack of growth there, and how we're already the second largest player there, I don't think that's where we want to focus our efforts. Soft drinks, the slowest growing, we're the biggest player. We could try to launch another Coke flavor, something like that. But again, I don't think that's our best bet. I'm really intrigued by this ready to drink coffee and tea, um, for a few reasons. Number one, it's highly fragmented and we are the biggest player. So we're doing well, but there's a lot of share that we could gain because there's so many small players here. And it's growing at almost 2.5 times all of the other bigger than faster than any of the other markets. So given how well we're doing and how fast it's growing and how fragmented it is, um, I'm kind of interested in that one. The juice would be the other one, but I think the place I would probably want to start would be the ready to drink coffee and tea, given, you know, our penetration is lower. It's the lowest of any of our categories, but we're still the biggest player. So I think we've figured some things out, but we could definitely figure more out here.
Excellent. No, I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. Truthfully, I don't know if Coke has done a whole lot. I see there's 16%. I, can't even name a whole lot of products. So I want to flip to the next piece. Do you now see two different charts?
I do. Okay,
Okay.
so yeah,
Would
go
love,
ahead.
your thoughts on this. So, just little context, found more insights from the RTD, fascinating. Definitely want to drive towards that. Coke has made some investments into coffee and tea historically, but, kind of mixed results. Would love to know, what do you see as what customers value most when selecting, these types of beverages?
Yeah. So the top chart, I'm seeing the beverages, so that's sort of the categories. And then these are six key attributes: taste, hydration, nutrition, experience, energy, and pairing. Um, was this done by a survey? Do you have any more information? Like, were these just tallied as like how important are these?
Exactly.
Okay, great. So I'm focused here on coffee and tea because we're thinking about this ready to drink coffee and tea market. So with coffee, I see energy, experience, and taste as the three most important. Hydration, obviously, nutrition, pairing, not really important. Not surprising there. When people are drinking coffee, they want it to taste good. They want it to jolt them up in the morning. With tea, uh, it's a little bit different, but I still see actually taste, nutrition, and experience are uh, hydration and nutrition are sort of right there, but taste and energy. Sorry, taste is still up the top. Experience. So interesting that people with drinking coffee versus drinking tea are looking for slightly different things. So it's not like it's a monolith here that we can say the coffee tea market is the same. Coffee definitely has more spikes. Tea is definitely a flatter, where these are all more similar. Um, Top attributes when shopping for a beverage. I'm having a little bit of a harder time reading this chart. Um, so I'm seeing a couple things that are popping out as the top. So low sugar, no artificial sweeteners, and simple recognizable ingredients is the top three: 49, 48, 49. So that's really interesting. You could have a great, iced tea, um, iced coffee that's low sugar, no artificial sweeteners, simple recognizable ingredients, where you're going to have tea, water, or coffee grounds, water. So I think what people are looking for when they're shopping for a beverage and the need for what people are looking for in coffee and tea are actually pretty well aligned.
And
So We
Maddie, in seeing
could,
this anecdotally, does
yep.
this make sense? Do you kind of see something else in your personal life, or you think, yeah, from the people I talk to, from the beverages you consume, does this track?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you thinking I'm Gen Z here, Ben. But um, you know, what I see is I'm a I'm kind of a simple, you know, drinker. I want water and I want coffee. I don't drink a lot of juice. I don't like a lot of sweet things, and so I oftentimes go to the grocery store and I'm looking for just like an iced coffee that I can drink at home. And it's actually pretty hard to find. A lot of them have tons of sweetener in them. Um, and it feels more like a milkshake than an actual iced coffee. And so I think that this really fits for what I'm looking for personally. So I do think that we could come up with something that would win in the coffee or tea category with simple ingredients, low sugar, and fits the needs for, you know, taste being top, energy being important, and then also, uh, hydration or experience if we're looking at tea.
Excellent.
Here's some feedback from Ben. Matty does well to describe the charts we're seeing and clarify the data he's being shown. He even confirms units and information that might be ambiguous. Matty is almost one-to-one following his original framework here. In his structure, he said he wanted to find a market that was large, growing, and ideally where Coca-Cola was underpenetrated. Matty immediately starts working through this chart by trying to find a market that fits what he was describing initially. This case featured a lot of data, 3 different charts presented over 4 or 5 minutes. A newer candidate may have gotten lost or confused in this much data, but Matty does well to pull out the information that is most important for Coca-Cola looking to launch a new product. Matty keeps things focused on the decision at hand. In a world where AI can generate thousands of pages of information in 2 minutes, your ability to filter out what matters is increasingly the thing that separates a truly great candidate.
Completely agree. I think those are fantastic insights. So want to understand kind of a market capture perspective now. So your team is examining whether this kind of ready to drink coffee product launch is, on brand with Coca-Cola and will work. So, thinking about going through Costa Coffee, which Coca-Cola currently owns as one of their sub-brands. So, I've got, a bunch of information for you right now. So global RTD coffee market is estimated at around 95 billion currently. US accounts for about 5% of that global RTD coffee revenue. Of Coca-Cola's 16% share currently of the RTD market, coffee makes up about 40%. Costa Coffee RTD line is expected to achieve about 5% share of the US RTD coffee segment in its first year. And then 1% of Costa's first year revenue is expected to potentially cannibalize Coca-Cola's existing RTD product lines. So, given that, a handful of information there, can you help me understand what is the projected year one net sales if you do launch this product?
Okay, there's a lot of numbers. Let me break down and approach this aligned with you on that, and then we can jump into the calculation. So
Let's
I
do it.
want to figure out what the US ready to drink coffee market size is. And then from there, I can calculate what our first year sales would be by taking that 5% of that market that we talked about. I'll then do whatever our cannibalization would be. So take our first year sales, and then figure out what a cannibalization rate is. We know it's like 1%. And then from there, I'll do our net sales. Does that sound like the right approach?
Excellent. Let's do it.
Great. So we said $95 billion ready to drink coffee market, and the US market makes up 5% of that. So I know 10% of 95 is 9.5, and one half of that would be 4.75. So the US market's going to be $4.75 billion in ready to drink coffee. We believe that Costa can get 5% of that. So 5% of 4.75 billion is 5% times that. So 10% would be 475 million. One half of that, we'll call it about 240 million. So we're then saying how much we're going to cannibalize. So we have our ready to drink sales is 16%, which is our current share of the ready-to-drink coffee market, times that 4.75 billion times 40%, which is okay. I'm getting about $300 million there. And our cannibalization will be 1% of that, 1% of the 240 that we estimate is our first. So that'd be 2.4 million. So our net sales for the year is that 240 million minus whatever we're cannibalizing, so 2.4 million, which is 235 million. Now, obviously that's above our hurdle. It's about 15% above the hurdle. But, if we're off by a percentage, we actually get 4% instead of 5%, we miss. So it is based off of, some interesting numbers and some interesting estimates. I would want to, have a little bit more proof before I put all of my eggs in that basket. But I do think, it gets us over the number that we're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that's really interesting perspective that, even if one of those pieces that we factored in goes awry, maybe we missed that target. And, is that a failure? It's a good question.
Here's some feedback from Ben. Matty does well to describe the calculations he wants to do before executing on the math. This procedure does two things. First, if he gets lost in the numbers, it makes it way easier for the interviewer to jump in and help if needed. Second, if Matty does fumble on some of the calculations, the interviewer at least knows that Matty was trying to do the right thing and could believe that Matty would be able to successfully run his calculation on an actual project. Matty finishes his calculations and immediately says, "Hey, this beats our goal of $200 million. It's important to remember that case math is not a performative test of your ability as a calculator. It's there to see if you can quickly find out if an idea is going to work and hit a goal or not. This type of conversation actually happens in the world of consulting, and you should always keep in mind that case math is a tool to make a decision and not some random bit of trivia that you're being tested on."
Kind of taking a step back from this. So it sounds like, maybe it's a good idea, certainly some risk, but, understanding consumer preferences has its own hurdle. So, Coca-Cola relies on historical and known data, kind of like what we've used thus far. But, I imagine many emerging trends don't necessarily show up in data until it's too late or until, these large corporate companies have had, too much time and can finally respond. So, given the length of time it takes Coca-Cola to do product releases similar to many corporate companies, larger amount of time, how can companies perhaps get ahead of these consumer shifts? So how can they identify these high potential ideas, before hard data comes out that, such as the stuff we've utilized in this case?
Yeah, it's a great question. Do you mind giving me just a second to kind of organize my thoughts?
Please.
Okay. So there's really three things that come to mind. So the first is early trend sensing and signal kind of mining. There's so much data on the internet right now, and I know with AI you can do a ton of scraping. So I would be looking for social media platforms. I'd be pulling from Reddit threads, TikTok videos, things like this, to try to figure out what people are talking about before it really hits the market. I think, with increased globalization, with social media, things that get hot in a small area can really blow up quickly. And there's tons of this stuff. I know Shopify does some of this analysis, Google Trends. So let's leverage those. The next one would be incubators. So, and looking for startups. Coca-Cola has the benefit of scale. And so, but it's harder for them to be as agile. So how could Coca-Cola use its scale? So, having a really robust M&A team that's looking for some of these up and coming companies and can buy them once they start to gain traction and use their distribution network and their manufacturing capabilities to get them out wide. It would also, and this should not just be in the US, this should be worldwide. thinking about, what is the taste also in different countries. And then finally is agile testing. Again, it's hard for Coca-Cola to be agile because it's so big, but how could you do localized SKUs in parts of the US, in smaller countries, and test these things in smaller batches before they go wide so you don't have something like a Coke Spice. And maybe Coke Spice does well in a certain market, but is not going to do well nationwide or worldwide.
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting ideas. Before we jump to perhaps the next piece, would you say that, you can, could you prioritize those? Do you think they all have to kind of happen in tandem and work with one another? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. I would first think about the early stage trend sensing,
Hmm.
because if you're able to do that, you can beat your competition and beat startups to the next idea. Um, Doing the incubator stuff is great, but you do have to then go through a due diligence process, buy some of these companies, and that's more expensive. There's also, if we're doing this, then Pepsi's going to be doing this, then other companies will be doing the same thing. I know that with Siete Foods, it's was just bought for $1 billion. Um, then they have kind of like a healthier line of tortilla chips, and so these things can get really expensive as these companies gain traction in the market. So I think if we're able to do this ourselves without having to acquire other companies, that would be probably most. That'd be where I'd want to focus the most.
No, that's a great point.
Here's some feedback from Ben. Matty does well to be structured in his brainstorm, even though we're 25 minutes into the case and starting to riff a little bit more informally. When prompted, Matty again has a clear point of view on where to start and where to prioritize in a next step.
All right. So, you led the analysis on this product innovation piece. The team is preparing to brief Coca-Cola's VP of Global Innovation on your team's findings. What do you have to say for your final recommendation?
Yeah. So looking at my results, my analysis here, what I would recommend is that we focus on launching a product in the ready to drink coffee and tea um, market, specifically one that focuses on good taste, functional nutrition, and sustained energy. The reason I chose this market was it has the highest growth rate, over 12%, and we have a lower market share here. And so there's a lot of white space. We can penetrate this, and it's growing quickly. I think if we're focused on, something that's aligned with the healthier younger generation, that's looking for, an experience-driven product, we can do really well. We assume that we're going to be able to get a 5% share rate, and if we do that, then we'll be able to get about $240 million in year one sales, which is over that $200 million. The risk here I see is that if we're off in those projections, we'll miss, even if we're off by just 1%. So I do want to kind of look into seeing if we can fortify our analysis there to make sure we're confident that we'll be able to get that 5%. The next step here would be two things. One would be to start developing this coffee drink or this tea drink, and testing it. And then at the same time, building out our web scraping and our analytics tools to make sure that we're staying ahead of what the next trends will be.
Excellent. That's fantastic. Matty, really appreciate all your help. Thank you.
Here's some feedback from Ben. Matty does well to reference points from his initial decision-making framework as part of his conclusion. He does not rehash every single point he made, but you can see that his initial approach has driven the way he tells the story of the final recommendation. The things that he wanted to investigate and hypothesized as being important were investigated and are important, and so they feature in his summary.
Hey everyone, it's Kenton Kavesky here, the founder of Rocketblocks. Thank you so much for watching this mock interview video. I hope you found it informative and helpful as you are getting ready to prepare for your own interviews and hopefully landing that job offer you are excited about. We have a ton of great content on the Rocketblocks channel coming out on a weekly basis, mock interviews, mini lessons, and chats with our Rocketblocks experts. So if you haven't subscribed yet already, please do so. There is a big red button below. And if you hit that, you'll get all of our content as soon as it comes out. Thanks for watching and have a great day.